Okay, now I'm going to adjust the record side of the machine, and as I mentioned before, we're going to start with the Azimuth. And to do that, I just need to make sure that the machine is recording something at a nominal level on both channels. The accuracy of that recording isn't important for this. That the two channels be the same level or that the frequency response be the same. None of that is important. All that matters is that we're getting a reasonable signal level on both channels, because I'm just using this recording for the Azimuth. I'm not concerned about its calibration just yet. So I'm going to start by recording a 1000 hertz tone and looking at it on the oscilloscope. And those two traces seem reasonably well aligned. I'm going to knock them out of alignment and then back in so that I can satisfy myself that I've gotten it relatively close. And that looks reasonably good to me. So now I'm going to, in the same fashion that we did for the Azimuth on the repro side, I'm going to change the oscillator to a high frequency. I should point out that the way that I've done this is not by using two independent oscillators, but by taking a single oscillator's output, splitting it through a parallel, and then sending that signal to both channels. So we have a calibrated oscillator on our patch bay, and I'm going to patch into that oscillator and then into a parallel connection here. That parallel connection is going to the inputs of the tape machine, and that will allow the identical signal from the oscillator to go to both channels of the tape machine. It's important that the inputs to the tape machine be receiving exactly the same signal. It's a bad idea and bad practice to use console channels or something like that and buses to split the signal for a stereo machine, because there can be some phase shift induced by the electronics of the channel electronics. And whenever possible, you should just use a simple parallel patch like this. You could also use a Y cable coming off of the patch bay or the oscillator into the two channels of the tape machine, or you could use some kind of a bridge that you could make yourself that would allow a single input to go to both channels. However you do it, it's important that the same signal be going to both channels. So I'm going to go over here to the oscillator and send a mid-frequency tone of 1 kilohertz. 1 kilohertz is a standard. It doesn't really matter what frequency you use. For a while, Ampex standardized on 700 hertz for their calibrations. I don't know why. But if you receive a tape at random from someone and it has calibration tones on it, it will most often be the decades of 1000 hertz for level, 10 kilohertz for high frequency response, and 100 hertz for low frequency response. So, having set this to 1000 hertz, near as damn it, I'm now going to check the output level of this oscillator, and I want it to be reading plus 4 dBu. And it seems to be dithering around 1/10 of a decibel, so I'm satisfied with that. That's close enough. And again, the exact frequency doesn't matter that much, but it's good practice to use the same frequency every time so that you are familiar with the behavior of the machine, and your practices become standardized so that you get them right every time. So I'm going to adjust the oscillator to a high frequency now. It doesn't really matter what high frequency, but 10 kilohertz is a standard, so it's a decade from where we started with 1000 hertz. So that's a nice, reasonable starting point. So in the same way, I'm not concerned if the levels are different on the two channels. I'm not concerned if there's an alignment difference between them on a frequency response basis. I just want to make sure that there's something recording on both channels so that I can adjust the azimuth. So I'm going to change the time constant of the oscilloscope here, and now I'm going to adjust the azimuth until those two signals look correlated, and that looks pretty good to me. I would be content with that. I would call that aligned. So now I've aligned the azimuth of the record head with respect to the playback head having been aligned to the reference tape, whether that was an existing session or a standardized alignment tape, is immaterial at this point. I'm now making the record side correspond to the reproduce side.